Shop the season's best values during the final days of Springfest at Lowe's. Get a Craftsman V20 string trimmer and leaf blower combo kit. Was $149, now just $99. And get a V20 pruning chainsaw for $99. Was $129. Craftsman has high-quality, high-performing, and reliable products for all your outdoor spring projects. Shop today, because Lowe's knows spring. Lowe's knows home improvement. Valid to 4/26. While supplies last. Selection varies by location.
It's JCPenney's Happy Birthday Sale, and the gifts are all yours. Celebrate this Saturday with an in-store coupon giveaway. You could peel and reveal $10, $50, or even $100 off. Don't miss out, but if you do, grab a coupon on the JCPenney app to save an extra 25% all week long. Hurry, party ends Sunday. JCPenney. Coupon giveaway valid 4/15 while supplies last. In-store only. Must be 18 or older. % off coupon valid through 4/16. Exclusions apply. See store or jcp.com for details.
Impact of influence, the Murdoch family murders. This is the unfolding story of a powerful South Carolina family, the mysterious deaths they are linked to, and our quest to bring you the truth. Hello, friend. As always, so grateful that you're spending time with us. I am Matt Harris, Seton Tucker back from vacation. Hello.
Hello.
Well, we have been working on other cases, and we hope to have one up very shortly about Shanquella Robinson from Charlotte, North Carolina, who was murdered in Mexico, and it is a very disturbing story, but hopefully you'll follow us as we move to another case. But we're going to keep the updates coming from anything Murdoch related. For instance, Alec Murdoch has been moved. And what do we know?
Well, News Nation has reported that Alec Murdoch has been moved to the McCormick Correctional Institute, which is kind of north of Augusta, kind of on the border of South Carolina, Georgia, south of Greenwood, South Carolina. This prison includes both a general population wing and a special management wing, which may be used for inmates who are in protective custody.
And John Snyder covered that in our last episode. You can go back and check that out. So Alec was only a stone's throw away from the Masters, but in a nice cell. So we also want to point out that Alec's been getting some letters.
Yes, it appears as if he did receive some communication while he was at the Kirkland Correctional Institute prior to his most recent assignment, and Fitz News had an article where you can read some of those communications.
We hope we'll have an episode about that coming up soon, we're hoping. All right, we had questions after the trial ended still about some of the forensics, so we went back to one of our favorites, Joseph Scott Morgan. Here's that interview. Joseph Scott Morgan, professor of applied forensics at Jacksonville State. You've seen him all over the tube talking about various cases. In 1985, he was a senior investigator with the Fulton County Medical Examiner in Atlanta. He remains one of less than 200 people nationwide to attain fellow status, and he's considered one of the leading experts on the coroner system in the United States. Good guy, and he's also the host of the podcast Body Bags.
One of my favorites.
It's great. Hello, Joseph Scott Morgan.
Yeah.
So, Joe, thanks for joining us. I know you're really busy with all the cases that you're dealing with, and it was hard to get all the time to get you in during the trial, but we have some questions that remain about this Murdoch trial. Let's start with the one about the defense's theory on how the shot occurred, and then the prosecution played it in as like a guy had to squeeze past him in the doorway and shoot him up above, and then the spatter would have been so horrendous that the shooter would have been basically incapacitated. Was the prosecution's expert and their theory, does that have any validity?
I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I will tell you where it doesn't lie, that you've got a leprechaun firing the weapon. That's not reality. Mm-hmm. That was probably one of the more absurd things that I heard.
About the 5'2" shooter.
That's just, that's just not part of reality, I think. And the fact that they talked about a shooter being in a very static position, and we as beings are not static. Our bodies aren't. We have multiple hinge joints. Our ankles, our knees, uh, our hips, elbows, wrist. So we articulate in various postures, and to say that is a hard and fast rule that this individual was in that position in the totality of the firing process is a bit absurd. And look, if you're firing a weapon, it's not unheard of for someone to be in a crouched, particularly in an offensive push toward a target. If you look at the way the military handles something, where they're kind of bent and crouched moving forward, but that's not what they're saying. They're saying this person was this height. And
right.
That was, I think, for me, that was very, very difficult for the jury to swallow, because that was it forever and ever. Amen. They had no waffle room in there whatsoever. And so you're really cutting your nose off to spite your face, I think, if that's your supposition going forward.
We heard two theories about how the shot occurred. One, I think the prosecution said it kind of came through an arm and went kind of in an upward angle. And then the defense said maybe it came from above.
The Paul one, right?
Yeah. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I got to tell you, this is where I think probably the prosecution side of the house really failed relative to Paul. One of the things that stood out, there's kind of there's a standard that you go by when you're doing an autopsy on a body and you're trying to assess range of fire and positionality of relation between the end of the muzzle and the point of impact. And I don't care how egregious the injury is, how horrible it is. And certainly that was described at great length. We heard about, Paul's brain being ejected. We heard about, everything was kind of macerated with the exception of his face. His face still existed. But the one problem you can't get past is that for whatever reason, the pathologist didn't shave the injury. And it's impossible to assess an entry location without shaving the hair away. And what does that do? Well, it gives you an idea of something that is a close contact or a contact wound. You have to shave that area away in order to assess soot deposition, stippling, which is the unburned powder, and any other elements that may be embedded in that area, because that gives you the kind of attitude that the end of the muzzle was in. And hence, if you have that, you can extrapolate from that what the position of the shooter was relative to the victim. Where were they in relation to the victim at the time the weapon was fired? Another problem also is, going back to Paul's brain, you hear the term eviscerated, which is generally associated with the removal of organs at autopsy. But I think the defense used the term eviscerated. The defense witness, Dr. Eisenstadt, used the term eviscerated. The brain was eviscerated. The prosecution witness, state ME, used the term ejected. It doesn't matter how it got out of the head, but what I do know is that the brain was not examined in an appropriate manner. The brain was not x-rayed. And so, one of the big things that you're drawing into question here is birdshot versus buckshot. That's a huge tell, because in my experience with shotgun wounds where you have, and I'm talking about ammunition that is like a non-solid mass where you're firing a slug, which is typically associated with hunting game with, it's like a huge chunk of lead. If you have projectiles coming out of the end of the bottle, out of the end of the barrel, they're going to spread, and they're going to leave some remnant. And the brain was not X-rayed. And so how are you going to assess what was and was not in there?
Mm. And
that goes to a bigger picture, doesn't it? You know,
right.
When you've got people showing up out there and they're still, still scratching my head over this to this day. There's still projectiles laying on the ground, guys.
Yeah.
You've still got pellets. I even saw them, you know, in scene images. I think we all did. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. These weren't collected? Are you serious?
Right.
And any other, you know, and I don't want to be too graphic, but any other biological remnant that's left behind. You know, Murdaugh's brother famously said, you know, he used the term bits of skull, I think.
Yeah.
You know, he cleaned that up, according to him. How can you not pick those items up, retrieve those, and bring those in? Because that's part and parcel. If you're talking about reconstruction of the skull, which you have to do at autopsy to get a sense of the dynamic of the fire, you know, you can have soot deposition on the bone itself. So you left a chunk of the bone out there? Is that what you're telling me?
A baseball-sized piece of the skull was found, right?
Big size too, yeah.
Yeah, and that's problematic, man. I mean, that's really problematic. That's something that it's kind of 101 stuff, you know, that you do. Mm-hmm. And it's not like anybody was in a hurry. So
right.
You're going to put the brain in a separate receptacle, which is not unheard of. I've done that. I've had, you know, over my course of time with the coroner down in New Orleans and the ME in Atlanta, I've had brains ejected from skulls. It just happens. It happens in motor vehicle accidents. It happens in gunfire-related accidents or incidences. So this is not something new under the sun. Okay, it does happen. You're not pressed for time. How much more time would it have taken to go about and pick up these elements and send those in with the body? You can't tell me that you couldn't see them. I could see at least, you know, I can see the tiny little pellets laying on the ground. How much more so can you pick up a big piece of tissue, you know, just visually? And you can't tell me you didn't have a light in order to visualize this if you're doing it in the dark.
Well, they were still there the next day too. So when the sun was up, they were still
exactly.
there. Yeah.
So you've got ambient light that's trickling in. You don't have the need for the glare of those. You know, you guys have always seen it in television shows, and it's the truth. And you see it out here, you know, in reality too, where we bring the big lights out to the scene.
Yeah.
And, you know, kind of blast away all of the shadows.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one of the reasons we do that. We want to be able to pick up on any kind of particulate evidence that's out there. So that's why I'm saying that, you know, with the dynamics of this event, the truth probably lies somewhere in the center out here.
Well, the pathologist said that the face would have not remained intact if it was, in fact, a contact wound. Do you have a thought on that?
I think a lot of people think that the projectile that comes out of the end of the weapon is the only thing that does destruction to tissue, and it's not. It's probably about half when you think about contact wounds. And so what she's talking about is that if this was a contact wound, and there's various levels to contact. You've got close contact, which means probably within about half an inch. Then you have kind of a press contact where the end of the muzzle is pressed against the skin. And then you have a tight contact, which is something totally different. If you're talking about a tight contact, not only is the projectile entering into the defect that's created, you know, by this event, you've also got hot gas. And we learn in that, you know, you learn as young as in the 7th grade, the 8th grade, what does hot gas do? Well, it expands, and it expands at a hell of a rate. And when you have that expansion that occurs, destruction comes along with it. So you'll get this kind of splitting and tearing of the skin.
Okay.
If people will think back, the forensics in the movie Silence of the Lambs are quite ridiculous. But there's one comment in there that Claire makes when she's in the back seat of the FBI car and she's, you know, taping her findings, you know, and she says a stellate gunshot wound to the chest. are star shaped. Well, star shape arises as a result of gas expansion, and the tissue actually tears, and it forms the shape of a star, stellate, and you get this ripping and shredding. So I don't necessarily buy into the idea that the face would not be there. I think that you would have this kind of ripping and shredding approximating the area where the projectile entered the body. On the head, you get these tears that kind of fan out. If you think about like that classic image, like at Christmas time with the Star of David, where it's got the long tail and that sort of thing, kind of expanding outward like that, you would expect that, and it'd be over the top. But just because you've got that doesn't mean that the face is going to be completely obliterated. So I don't completely buy into that supposition.
Go ahead, Steve.
We heard a lot about skin tags and how they might indicate directionality. Can you explain this to us?
Yeah, the little skin tags that are being referred to is that they kind of point relative to the direction of the energy of this blast. So if you think of them as like kind of like little arrows, if you will, how the skin is kind of ripped away, that gives an indication as to what. They take these terms and kind of church them up, and pathologists will say directionality. It's the direction. All right, it's what it comes down to. Yeah, you can say directionality if you want to, but it's the direction of the flight of the round is what they're saying, and that energy that's being dispersed gives you an idea because it's ripping and kind of taking the tissue away or downrange away from the muzzle. And so what happens is that in the midst of that dynamic, the skin is kind of being torn away, and it points in the direction of flight of the projectile.
Just because the police can't solve a murder doesn't mean other people won't find someone to blame. In the upcoming season of Witnessed Devil in the Ditch, journalist Larison Campbell returns to her Mississippi hometown to re-examine one of its most notorious unsolved cases and one of the small town's greatest mysteries, the murder of her grandmother, Presh, who was murdered, likely with a candlestick. Her family's tried to find the killer, so what happens when a family and a community suspect one of their own? Find out for your next new true crime obsession. From Campside Media and Sony Music Entertainment, Witnessed Devil in the Ditch is available now. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts to binge all episodes now, or listen weekly wherever you get your podcast.
Hello Fresh. Hello Fresh is great. I've used it, and it really makes mealtime a lot less stressful. You get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes right to your doorstep. It skips that whole, what are we going to have for dinner tonight? Because it's right there in the box with the recipes, and it makes cooking easy and fun. I cook with my 13-year-old and 17-year-old daughters, and I'm no chef, and we have a good time doing it. The cost of grocery keeps going up. HelloFresh is cheaper than grocery shopping and 25% less expensive than takeout. They have 40 weekly recipes to choose from for all meal occasions, lifestyles, preferences. Go to HelloFresh.com/Murdoch60 and use code Murdoch60 for 60% off plus free shipping. That's HelloFresh.com/MURDAUGH60 and use code Murdoch60 for 60% off. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit.
With one of the best savings rates in America, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than choosing Slash to be in your band.
Next up for lead guitar. You're in.
Cool. Yep, even easier than that. And with no fees or minimums on checking and savings accounts, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One NA, member FDIC.
Did you see anything or hear anything that would say to you two shooters other than two guns? Or is that one of those that's the answer could be, one, or it could be two?
Maybe two shooters. However, I think that if you've got someone that has if someone is keen on perpetrating a crime like this, and they understand, even at a rudimentary level, as to how crime scenes work and the way we do things, it would seem to me that if you show up with two long arms, you're trying to throw people off scent, if you will, at that moment in time.
Or one just happens to be laying around when you need
right.
it.
Or you're trying to inject this premise into it. And I think a lot of us thought that. I know I did. You know, you start to think about a shoulder fire or a long arm, and it's unwieldy. Excuse me. It's unwieldy. It seems impractical that someone in this short amount of time could utilize effectively two long arms and be able to put rounds on target that quickly.
Too hard to carry them around. Yeah,
it is. But, you know, listen, we've gone through, I don't know, guys, we're coming out of 20 years of war. So when you start to talk about an AR platform, one of the most prevalent things that is out there that people have seen in the news media for 20 years, guys, are tactical slings. And you can buy them anywhere. You know, I've got,
wow.
I don't know, I've got here in Alabama, I've probably got 5 gun stores within about a 20-mile radius. I could go and buy a tactical sling right now. And it keeps it centered on your chest. I mean, look at any of the images out there of our troopers in the field that are carrying, that are under arms, and they're in a hostile environment. They're carrying a tactical sling. Well, what that does is that it makes it easy to manage that weapon because it's carried on your chest. It's not like an old slinged weapon that you have over your shoulder. That's easy to explain. You know, you show up with a tactical sling on this AR platform, and you're carrying the 12 gauge. Yeah, it's easy as hell to make that happen.
Interesting.
You know, all you have to do is put a little thought into it. I mean, the standard idea is the platforming of the weapons. You carry a long arm, and then you carry a sidearm.
Right.
And that transition seems a lot more feasible.
Quicker.
But if you initiate with a shotgun, you fire the rounds, and this is even interesting as well. And some people say, well, people down here in the South, they always load a round of I heard 2 or 3 people say this, I think over social media. People always load up a round of birdshot followed by buckshot. Birdshot is to warn you, and the buckshot is to finish you. Yeah. And I've heard several people say that. Well, you can look at it that way, or you can say, well, is this another attempt to throw people off scent? You know, not only do you have 2 weapons, but you got 2 different types of ammunition being fired out of the 12 gauge.
True. An unusual one that will not be found anywhere else on the property.
Right. You're absolutely right. And again, you know, you go, you know, there's more. It's not even a matter of more than one truth. There's more than one possibility. And in forensics, look, one of the things I love about one of the beauties and the elegance of forensics is that, you know, negative findings are just as fantastic as positive findings, because negative findings will push you in a different direction to try to solve the puzzle. And just because this doesn't necessarily work this way, you have to begin to think about, well, how else could it have worked, particularly if somebody's attempting to deceive us. I think Alec Murdaugh was trying to deceive everybody in this. I think that
yes,
I'm no rocket scientist, all right? I can guarantee you that. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to kind of figure that out. You know, you already have this kind of pattern that's developing, you know, throughout this guy's life, the way he presents himself, what he's doing. You know, look at the left hand while the right hand is doing this kind of thing. Yeah. And he's familiar, at least, with the courts. And understands, you know, he's no prosecutorial genius or anything, but he understands enough to be dangerous. And I think he was attempting to throw people off scent with all of this. I think my big question is this. I want to know where those weapons are, and I think that they will be found.
Oh yeah.
And I hold that they're at the bottom of a deep dark well somewhere. and it's going to take somebody with a keen eye, somebody with the right equipment that can go out and find them. You've got all these sloughs around there as well, withstanding water where they could have been tossed out.
Lots of water.
It's amazing what happens when water rises and falls. It's amazing what happens when somebody discovers an old abandoned well that maybe hadn't been seen in years and years. Would this individual have had time to dismantle these weapons? I mean, cut them into tiny pieces and dispose of them. I don't know and I don't know if he would have been sophisticated enough to do that.
Yeah. One more.
So I think I'm going to be really watching to see what happens. And also, I still have the specter in the back of my mind. Did he have any kind of accessories after the fact? Is there anybody that helped him?
Seaton and I think the same thing.
Yeah, we have those questions. Before we let you go, we heard a lot about how much blood you would have been covered after shooting Paul. We heard Mr. Clean and
they started with they started as Mr. What was it?
Mr.
And then went to Mr. Clean.
Mr. Clean. Anyway, what is your opinion? Would the shooter of Paul have just a tremendous amount of blood and brain matter and that sort of thing on them, or would it be possible to not be covered?
Again, it rests somewhere in the middle. When you say covered, covered implies, you've had a bucket of blood, dumped on you. All right. Or that you're exposed to so much tissue, you can see it all over you. These things are going to be particulate. And it's going to be high velocity. So it'll be very fine when you see it.
Okay.
And the nature of this is not, it's not going to be a standard blood deposition, because this is going to be back spatter that you're going to have. So you've got the energy is driving that projectile into the target area, and the target area is therefore splashing backwards. And I've used this analogy to kind of simplify it. I think I said it on body bags in one of my episodes. When you're a kid and you're walking about with your family or whatever, your friends, and there's just been a big rain, and one of your friends that wants to be a jerk, picks up a big rock, and you're standing next to a mud hole, and they throw it in the mud hole, and you get splashed with it. It's kind of the same principle. You got a projectile that's flying into this pool of muddy water. And not only is it liquid, but it's viscous mud. Let's say that represents the tissue. So depending upon the velocity that this thing enters, it's going to splash back out. And it's going to deposit on whatever's in the immediate vicinity. If you're really close to this, you're gonna have deposition on you. Now, how it looks, it's going to be hard to kind of ascertain that, how it's going to present to people that are eyeballing you initially. That's where time comes in. Would he have had sufficient amount of time in order to render himself clean? Was he wearing something? A pair of coveralls, for instance. Did he have coveralls on? Did he go to the extent of having a Tyvek suit? Can you imagine that? A Tyvek suit like we wear on crime scenes.
Crime scenes, yeah.
And and would he have had that? Did they do a search history for that sort of thing? You begin to think about that. Or did he just have an old pair of coveralls laying around?
Or did he just take his shirt off?
And then or take his shirt off. Famously, I used to work with a forensic pathologist. Can you believe this? It's the first part of my career where he did autopsies nude from the waist up.
Wow.
And he'd wear a white apron, a white plastic apron. That's all he wore. It's
Sounds
not like
Dexter.
this hasn't been thought of or done before. And then you go take a shower. Now, I mean, that's not something I'd want to participate in. To each his own, man. Whatever.
Honey, I'm home. I got to take a shower.
It does make you think of Dexter. Yeah, mine goes there.
Yeah, it kind of does. But then, the other added element to this that gives it an even more callous nature is that you're going to have this deposition on your person from a life that you've created and from a life that you've created life with.
Huh.
And and you're not used to it. I'm not saying I'm some kind of ogre, but I spent a lot of years working in the morgue, guys.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Right.
I mean, even, I've assisted in over 7,000 autopsies. I've been at countless death scenes over the course of I couldn't do it.
Right.
I had to do an autopsy on a friend of mine one time,
Jesus.
and it just about completely destroyed me. If I had it to do over again, I would not have done it. But I did it because it was my job. How much more so can you imagine? Can you actually imagine him doing this to his family? It gives you a level of callousness that I don't think people have really done the math on. They've talked about it a little bit, but when it gets down to the root of it, and you look at how over the top this crime was and what he bore witness to, now convicted of having borne witness to it, that adds a completely different spin on this case.
Would you agree that Maggie was shot, or that Paul was shot first and Maggie was running towards Paul?
Yeah, I've thought that. And again, I have no way of proving this. I almost felt like that Maggie I felt like he baited her with Paul's death in some way. I don't know if it was from a great distance or if it was where she was precisely. I don't know that we'll ever know that.
Right.
But there's no way that you'll ever convince me that she wouldn't have heard 2 12-gauge rounds go off in the middle of the night up there in that house. Yeah. If she was in the house, she would have heard it. And people will say, oh, they're always popping off weapons out there. Well, maybe they are, big piece of property, but they're popping off weapons out at the dog kennels at this time of night. That's what you're telling me? And that wouldn't have drawn attention to anybody, other people that would have been occupying that space. Yeah. That's why I think that Paul was probably fired upon first. Mm-hmm. And then Maggie came, she knew, Paul was down there. It's her baby. She's going to go rushing down there. Or maybe he called out to her. I have no idea. I'm thinking about that kind of manufactured call, that he had. Oh, God, they did it bad. What if he shouted out to Maggie and drew her attention to it? I don't know. There's no way to prove it, but I've always kind of entertained that.
He's the best. He is Joe Scott Morgan, and he is the host of Body Bags, which is a very cool podcast. You guys should check that out. You can catch him on he makes the rounds, Court TV a few times with me and many other shows. So look for him. He's a good dude. Joe, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
No worries, guys. Y'all have a great day.
You're the best. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, brother. We'll talk soon. All right, let's check out some of the messages or emails that we received. Murdoch Podcast Facebook page from Irene. Hi, I have been listening to your podcast and watched most of the trial. There was news coverage of a text sent by Maggie to a friend on her way to Moselle in which she allegedly said she thought something fishy was going on and that Alex was up to something. That never came into evidence that I saw. You know why? Is it because it simply wasn't true? No such text existed? Or was it excluded from evidence for some reason? Thanks so much. Love the podcast. And I'm sad the trial is over. I don't have an opportunity to listen to you guys much longer. Seaton?
Yeah, I mean, I would think if there was some sort of text that said he was acting fishy, that would have been introduced into evidence and we didn't see it during the course of the trial.
So I'm assuming it didn't exist because they went through all of her text.
I would think, but again, maybe there was a reason they didn't admit it.
Gotcha. And also, we should tell you that we are looking at other cases. We're not done with this one. And we are trying to figure out which will be our next podcast. So hang around, and hopefully you'll stick around for whatever we choose to do next. This is from an email from Matt Harris, podcast@gmail.com, from Scott. Just want to let you and Seaton know how much I enjoyed your podcast. To be truthful, I was late to the show. I basically binged your podcast while the trial started. And we will say some of those early episodes, we were a little rough.
Thank you for sticking with us.
I can honestly say that you and Seaton provided a podcast that let the listener draw their conclusions of what happened. Disregard the feedback. You two are awesome. Just a quick comment on my thoughts on the murders. I believe Alex did it. My only question is, how could he possibly clean himself, get rid of his weapons and clothing? I just think he must have had help. We probably will never know the total truth of what happened that horrible night. Again, thank you, and Seton, for all your hard work in the podcast. I've learned a lot about the judicial system. Hopefully, you'll keep us up to date with the financial crimes. We will. And we're looking forward to taking on our next case and letting you know any updates that might come down the road with anything Murdoch related.
Yeah, I am personally hoping that we get answers to where all the money is, and that could be really interesting.
In that interview that Channel 11 Court TV did with the defense team, they say that they know where all the money is. That'll be interesting. And I'm also interested to see where the drug thing will go. Because there's still a couple of guys in jail being accused of being part of the drug line and also Cousin Eddie's still out there.
Yeah.
So we got all that. All right. Always enjoy spending time with you. Hopefully you do with us. We're grateful for it. And hopefully you'll share this episode and rate it and leave a positive comment. That always helps. And we'll talk soon, friend.
Shop the season's best values during the final days of SpringFest at Lowe's. Get a Craftsman V20 string trimmer and leaf blower combo kit. Was $149, now just $99. And get a V20 pruning chainsaw for $99. Was $129. Craftsman has high-quality, high-performing, and reliable products for all your outdoor spring projects. Shop today, because Lowe's knows spring. Lowe's knows home improvement. Valid to 4/26. While supplies last. Selection varies by location.
It's JCPenney's Happy Birthday Sale, and the gifts are all yours. Celebrate this Saturday with an in-store coupon giveaway. You could peel and reveal $10, $50, or even $100 off. Don't miss out, but if you do, grab a coupon on the JCPenney app to save an extra 25% all week long. Hurry, party ends Sunday. JCPenney. Coupon giveaway valid 4/15 while supplies last. In-store only. Must be 18 or older. % off coupon valid through 4/16. Exclusions apply. See store or jcp.com for details.